Me or them.
Fans around the world were startled by Molly Qerim's departure from ESPN, but she is now finally talking. In a startling turn of events, she is also blaming Stephen A. Smith for everything.
Can't wake up and be Stephen A. It takes work. In the end, we all have people to answer.
Over the years, Stephen A. has criticized innumerable people, but is he once again the center of attention? Let's get started. The unexpected departure that no one anticipated. Since 2006, Molly Qerim, a well-known sportscaster, has played a significant role at ESPN. Before moving into on-air duties, she worked first on digital and mobile platforms. In 2015, she joined Stephen A. Smith as the permanent host of the morning debate show First Take, helping it to become one of ESPN's flagship programs that saw its highest viewership in 2023. However, this is where the plot truly takes off, and most people didn't notice it at all. Qerim announced her departure via an Instagram story, in which she thanked fans for their support and highlighted the privilege of anchoring First Take and working with brilliant colleagues during her tenure at ESPN. She called the event a dream come true and hinted at upcoming projects with Stay Tuned, but she made no claims or gave no particular explanation for her departure. This is the point at which everything goes completely crazy. Molly arrived at work on Monday, September 15th, performed her ditties on the First Take as she had for the previous 10 years, and then left the studio without any fanfare or ceremony. I mean, no one had any idea that this would be her last performance. However, everything blew up the very next morning. This quiet disclosure stood in stark contrast to her sudden resignation, which took effect right away and accelerated a planned departure that was initially scheduled for the end of the year as a result of a Sports Business Journal leak. Take a moment to consider that. We are discussing a departure that was initially scheduled for months later, but was abruptly made imminent overnight. Why would there be such a sharp acceleration? In actuality, this was more than a straightforward resignation. There's evidence strewn throughout the aftermath of her announcement that was a well-planned move that took ESPN completely off guard. ESPN acknowledged that she had been offered a new contract and that contract talks had been going on. Qerim chose to go on and look for new opportunities. Here's what, though, makes this narrative even more captivating. The manner in which Stephen A. Smith learned of this departure makes clear how abrupt and unanticipated it was. And this is where the seemingly cordial and professional split begins to show signs of flaws.
She abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to...
Stephen's response reveals all the information we require about how unprepared everyone was for this choice. This notice of leaving was not prearranged or organized. You could hear it in his voice during that broadcast. This was damage control in real time. When you take into account the corporate response, the timing of everything appears even more dubious. ESPN's president of content, Burke Magnus, publicly thanked Qerim for her accomplishments, praising her poise, competence, professionalism, and role in driving First Take's success since 2006. He made it clear that the network wanted her to continue, including talking about positions outside of the show, but that her wishes were not entirely met by the discussions. This is the point at which the narrative takes yet another intriguing turn. Magnus mentioned ESPN's intention to evaluate possible successors, including in-house talent like Shea Cornette, Christine Williamson, and Monica McNutt, during a 30 to 45-day tryout period, and characterized the situation as a clear business choice, free of controversy. But why did this happen so suddenly if it was such a simple business decision? Why was immediate damage control necessary? Above all, what caused Stephen A. Smith to appear so visibly shocked and moved by the departure? The solution is found in comprehending the intricate network of connections, power struggles, and commercial discussions that were taking place at ESPN behind the scenes. We saw more than just a host and a performance. Tensions that had been building for months or perhaps years eventually reached a breaking point. Speaking of turning points, let's discuss the most significant feature of Molly's announcement of her resignation. She expressed gratitude to her fans and coworkers in her Instagram story. She thanked them for the opportunity and hinted at a future project. However, there is one obvious omission that gives away a lot about the actual situation behind the scenes. She made no specific reference to Stephen A. Smith. Not once. That may not seem like much, but in the world of television partnerships, especially ones that have been in place for 10 years, that kind of absence is deafening. Shannon Sharpe made sure to respect his relationships and partnerships before leaving without a fight. Professional courtesy and acknowledgments were given as Max Kellerman left the first take. However, Molly's speech was noticeably lacking in any personal acknowledgement of her 10-year co-host. When you take into account the public personas that Molly and Stephen A. consistently displayed, this exclusion becomes even more noteworthy. This powerful duo was their intended form. This business collaboration had enabled First Take to reach previously unheard of heights. In addition to her work at NFL Network and CBS Sports, Krim has been candid about her personal struggles, including her fight with endometriosis. On First Take, her retirement from ESPN was announced on September 16, 2025, signaling the end of a 10-year stint, although it was presented as a voluntary choice. Rather than being fired, on screen, Molly and Stephen A.'s professional chemistry was evident. However, that on-screen chemistry might have been concealing some significant behind-the-scenes issues that had been developing for a while, as we're about to learn in the following section of this story. When you take a look at the immediate aftermath of the announcement, the narrative becomes even more complex. Magnus told The Athletic that ESPN has been preparing a 30 to 45-day tryout period for replacements, and that the suddenness was caused by the leak. But this begs other questions. Why was ESPN attempting to negotiate a new contract with her at the same time that they were preparing for her departure and had a plan in place for a replacement? Stephen's answer in the dynamics of hidden power. We're going to delve deeply into the power dynamics and behind-the-scenes dynamics that the majority of people never see. So this is where the tale truly gets interesting. There was more to Molly Karim's exit from ESPN than either professional conflicts or contract discussions. It's about understanding the true nature of power and influence in sports media. And furthermore, most people are not aware of how complicated Stephen A.'s position in all of this is. Let's start with Stephen A.'s immediate response to Molly's departure, because of his reaction tells us so much about the real dynamics at play here.
But it came as a shock. I was not aware that this is something that she was contemplating doing. But in the end, she made her decision. And we have to move on as a show. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. Because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business. And I'm going to miss her.
Here's what makes this response intriguing, though. Although Stephen A. is displaying shock and anguish, he is also exercising extreme caution in how much of himself he divulges.
An idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No. Because again, that's her story.
When you consider the criticism Stephen A. received for his handling of the announcement, this attention to detail becomes even more important. Hosts Emmanuel Acho, Kieran Hickey, and LaShawn McCoy of the Speakeasy podcast accused Smith of escalating rumors by teasing secret information and using phrases like abruptly resigned, which they claimed made it seem like something crazy happened. Acho specifically criticized Smith for revealing some information while maintaining his privacy, saying it was inconsistent and added needless trauma to the breakup. This criticism goes far beyond simply pointing out a lack of communication skills. Acho and others pointed out that rather than merely respecting his colleagues leaving, Stephen's response appeared to be planned to create a lot of talk and conjecture. And this methodical approach begins to make a lot more sense when you look more closely at the power dynamics at ESPN. The majority of people are unaware of this aspect of Stephen A. Smith's position at ESPN. He is more than just First Take's star. He serves as the show's executive producer as well. This indicates that he has considerable control over decisions about casting, show direction, and yes, even the terms of contracts for other program performers. In addition to his established reputation in sports discourse, Smith has already become a prominent voice in politics. Additionally, he is one of the most influential people at the network due to his nearly $40 million annual contract. When you realize how much of an impact Smith has, Molly's leaving becomes entirely different. There was more to this than ESPN's refusal to compensate her fairly. This concerned Stephen A. Smith's possible failure to stand up for his tenured co-host when it mattered most. At this point, Marcellus Wiley's insight, a former ESPN analyst, becomes vital to comprehending the actual events. Wiley speculated on possible behind-the-scenes drama on his podcast, implying that unfulfilled demands for more money, roughly $500,000 a year, as opposed to Smith's $20 million, and her own program with Smith, who allegedly did not stand up for her, were the main reasons behind Kareem's departure.
The last part of it is, this is the twist. She wanted to do other stuff. No, basically. You wanted to host your own show? No, basically. You want more money? Not much. Now, who signs off on all the money there? Think about it. Think about it. The bosses. But who are the bosses? That's Stephen A. Smith as well.
Something that most viewers seldom think about is shown by this analysis: the enormous gap in actual power and influence within the network in addition to income. Stephen A. was earning $20 million a year, whereas Molly was earning only $500,000. A 40-to-1 ratio that goes well beyond simply acknowledging each actor's role in the success of the show. However, the gap in wealth is only the beginning. Knowing how Stephen A.'s influence permeates ESPN's decision-making process is much more illuminating. Y brought up Smith's involvement in contract discussions with other coworkers, pointing out that Smith's advocacy can make or break agreements for other first-take contributors.
This deal. And when Perkins was up, remember? Perkins was getting a day job rate, and he turned that into $700,000 a year job. Perkins just talked about that recently, about how Stephen A. Smith has that pull. Stephen A. Smith even talked about that when he checked Cam Newton recently, talking about, hey, I've hooked a lot of guys up with money around here.
This identifies a pattern that is vital to comprehending Molly's predicament. Stephen A. has continuously utilized his position of power to support certain of his coworkers, while apparently not doing the same for others. What position did Molly occupy in this system then? Furthermore, why didn't Stephen A. stand up for her the way he has for others? Knowing how their working relationship has changed over time may hold the key to the solution. Even though they appeared to be professional on camera, there had been many occasions of conflict and tension that, when looked back on, point to a relationship that wasn't as strong as it seemed to viewers. Studies of Molly Qerim and Stephen A. Smith's past exchanges show that any imagined animosities between them are more often the result of on-air arguments and lighthearted banter than of long-standing personal disputes. But a number of occurrences over the years suggest that tensions are rising. For example, in December 2024, during a segment about Bill Belichick's possible coaching position at UNC, the conversation became heated when Qerim criticized Smith's opinions, claiming that he disliked small markets and prioritized box office appeal. Then there was the incident in January 2024 when Qerim seemed irritated during a conversation and muttered, "What the F-E*** key?" in response to Smith's remarks regarding her transition from host to supermodel. Because it appeared to convey real frustration rather than lighthearted joking, this moment went viral. Perhaps the most telling, though, was the June 2025 event, in which Qerim tactfully told Smith to shut down his laptop after the camera unintentionally showed his screen, possibly revealing private messages. Smith was hesitant at first, but he agreed to Qerim's explanation of the risk to avoid humiliation. Online, the exchange was depicted as Smith not paying attention. Qerim's advice was beneficial, but Smith's rejection revealed an underlying conflict. When considered separately, these instances could appear to be normal workplace dynamics. However, if you combine them across 10 years and then account for power disparities and contract negotiations, a pattern of a partnership that was progressively more strained underneath the surface shows up. Whitey pointed out that she had left Smith out of her farewell note as a show of animosity, and that she purposefully left right away to draw attention to the matter by portraying it as a professional issue rather than personal strife. He underlined that the connection wasn't as solid as it seemed. This leads us to what may be the most damning element of the whole circumstance: the idea that Stephen A. Smith, who had so much power and influence at ESPN, simply decided not to stand up for Molly when it counted most. And if that's the case, it calls into question professional relationships, loyalty, and the harsh reality of sports media politics. The fallout and the true significance of everything. Let's now discuss what transpired between Molly Qerim and Stephen A. Smith, as well as the wider ramifications for sports journalism and how power dynamics manifest in high-stakes broadcast settings. Because this goes beyond a simple quarrel over a contract or a professional issue. It serves as an example of how loyalty, influence, and business choices interact to radically change relationships and careers. Since ESPN's answer reveals how seriously they considered the possible ramifications of this scenario, let's start with the immediate aftermath of Molly's departure and how they handled the problem. ESPN characterized the matter as an uncontroversial, simple business move. However, the haste with which they implemented damage control implies otherwise. This is what makes ESPN's corporate response so interesting. When a talent departs the network, they do something that they hardly ever do. ESPN typically sends out a quick, generic statement wishing the departing employee well before moving on. However, Burke Magnus, the president of content at ESPN, provided The Athletic with thorough explanations of Molly's departure circumstances. Anything very out of the ordinary for the network.
The thing that was unexpected was the timing of all this, Magnus told Dice. She, Molly, put out a statement because there was a report on it, so it kind of got out of our respective controls once that happened.
This degree of corporate justification implies that ESPN was sincerely worried about the storyline surrounding Molly's exit. They were losing more than just a host. They might be dealing with a PR disaster that could harm their premier morning program and bring up awkward issues regarding how they handle talent. However, the speculation and analysis from industry insiders who are aware of the true forces at work have been the most illuminating part of the aftermath. Marcellus Wiley, a former ESPN presenter, has offered insights into the inner workings of power relations and contract negotiations at the network, and his analysis has been especially enlightening.
A report comes out, I guess it triggers her, or more importantly, she's like, why am I sitting in a situation that I know won't get better? Think about it. You too. Beat it up in the comments. Tell me your thoughts about it. But when you know you need to do something and you know it's best for you, what you waiting for?
This interpretation captures the essence of what most likely transpired. Molly eventually concluded that no matter how long she waited or how hard she negotiated, her circumstances at ESPN would not get better. Her choice to quit right away, rather than put up with months more of what she probably perceived as futile negotiations, makes perfect sense when you consider the power dynamics and money differences at play. The story becomes even more intricate and illuminating regarding the current status of sports media at this point, though. Despite not co-hosting the network's flagship morning program, stars like Mina Kimes were making a lot more money than Molly, according to Wright's investigation, which also brought attention to ESPN's glaring financial inequities.
Molly, you're working at a network where Mina Kimes is making way more money than you, and Mina Kimes is the number what on what show, right? You're number 2 on the number 1 show, and she is what on what shows, right? So your point is like, and you see Malika Andrews, all that, that's a different lane, that's a whole different animal, different beast.
Something important about how ESPN views various kinds of talent and responsibilities inside the network is revealed by this financial environment. It implies that despite First Take's enormous popularity and cultural influence, co-hosting the show wasn't given the same respect as other positions inside the ESPN network. Not in terms of Molly's remuneration, anyway. It is impossible to overlook the gender dynamics at play here, and they give the narrative an additional level of complexity. Some trends raise uneasy concerns about how female hosts and contributors are valued in comparison to their male colleagues when you examine the pay scales and chances offered to various talent at ESPN. However, there is a deeper factor at work here than just the power and money relationships: high-stakes media settings. Although it appeared to be supportive on the surface, Stephen A. Smith's reaction to Molly's leaving disclosed some important information about their true connection.
Quite frankly, none of y'all business, but it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her, but in the end, rather, she made a decision to walk away from the show effective immediately, as you see from her Instagram post, her Instagram story.
something important about how ESPN views various kinds of talent and responsibilities inside the network is revealed by this financial environment. It implies that despite First Take's enormous popularity and cultural influence, co-hosting the show wasn't given the same respect as other positions inside the ESPN network. Not in terms of Molly's remuneration, anyway. It is impossible to overlook the gender dynamics at play here, and they give the narrative an additional level of complexity. Some trends raise uneasy concerns about how female hosts and contributors are valued in comparison to their male colleagues when you examine the pay scales and chances offered to various talent at ESPN. However, there is a deeper factor at work here than just the power and money relationships: high-stakes media settings. Although it appeared to be supportive on the surface, Stephen A. Smith's reaction to Molly's leaving disclosed some important information about their true connection.